This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self-Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy. Hello, Tiffanee. Welcome back.
Looking sharp, Bobby Capuccio. How are you?
Thank you. I took off my tie, so this is more of a casual look. Just got back from an event in San Diego. Welcome, everybody. Good to have you back on the show. Well, not on the show, but listening to the show.
Tuning in.
If we ever do one of those things where we do this on Facebook Live, or what's that audio thing that social media platform?
You've banged on about it a lot.
I have banged on about it a lot. It's just escaping me because I'm nearly brain dead. But if we ever do something like that, maybe we can get some of you on the show rather than just listening to the show. But in any event, we are grateful that you are here.
Do you know what I have to plan with you and keep forgetting? A three-way with Mark LeBusque.
I've been waiting my whole life to hear you say those words.
Podcast.
Got it, but
podcast three-way. No, on the last episode I did with Mark, we want to do an episode with you. Episode like an actual podcast episode, not an episode. Just logistically wouldn't work. You too far away.
Jeez, Tiffanee.
Clean it up. Come on. What are we talking about today? Let's move straight on before this goes straight to the gutter.
Well, today, let's talk about my day.
It's unpacking.
Some discussion, and somebody had asked the question, like, how do you allow yourself to let other people love you? I thought, what a heartbreaking question, because the fact that somebody would craft that question, like if you have two people, I was about to say two experts, but I was up there. So you have two people sitting on a panel and you can ask them anything. That's what you would want to ask them. And I thought the structure of that question implies that love and connection, intimacy is what this individual craves deeply. But for whatever reason, there's a fear that's stopping them from being vulnerable enough to allow other people to love them in a meaningful, fulfilling way. What a tragedy.
Yeah, I get it, though. I would have asked that question.
Well, we know you would have. I mean, it comes down to, so little bit of history. Back in the 1960s, John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth created a theory around attachment styles.
Yeah.
Attachment styles of very young children and how that affects how they relate to their caregivers. And then in 1990, Horowitz and Bartholomew created a pretty much 4 archetypal adult attachment style theory that says that based on your past experiences and how you see yourself and how you see other people, what happened to you in your past, you're one of these 4 attachment styles generally. And only one of them is secure. Only one of them is a really healthy attachment style where you grew up with the stability in the home, whether, it was a single parent home or 2 parents, but whoever that parent or ideally parents were, they were secure and they gave you a lot of love and you felt safe around them. And that gave you the confidence to go out and form relationships and explore the world. And if something did happen that did hurt you, you could always fall back on that sense of security and that identity that was shaped for you in your formative years. So you basically feel that you're someone who's worth loving. You're a worthwhile, lovable person, and you view other people as healthy and attentive and trustworthy. So when you get into more intimate types of relationships later on in life, you have that going for you. So that type of dynamic is supportive of a relationship that's fulfilling. But then you have other attachment styles that kind of get in the way, especially a fearful avoidance style, because it's more of a combination of two of the other attachment styles that could potentially be maladaptive. One of them is dismissive avoidant. And that basically says, well, I know I'm worthwhile. I'm worth love and affection, but other people cannot be trusted. So it's your perception of other people that causes you to devalue intimacy in your life as something that you're striving for. And then, there's someone who is preoccupied where it's the opposite. You look at other people like, well, other people are loving, other people are trustworthy, other people are supportive, but I'm not worth anything. I'm not deserving of love. So you're not necessarily trying to sabotage the relationship to get out of it, but you're constantly needing affirmation from the other person. You show up, this is the person who is absolutely insecure, becomes probably highly suspicious when that person goes out, sees friends, does anything apart from that individual because, what if they found somebody better than me? And that constant reassurance can sometimes create codependency and wear your partner out. It's a lot. And then you have your fearful avoidant. And this is really precarious because you view yourself as unworthy and other people as untrustworthy. So you try to sabotage that relationship to spare you the pain of the inevitable rejection or betrayal that you're pretty much sure, sometimes, subconsciously, that you're anticipating. And it's like, I think, that happens with people who were victims of, I don't want to say abuse, because in a fearful avoidant attachment style, it's a parent who was behaving in a way, one or more parents behaving in a way that was highly unsafe. So that's either overt abuse, whether physical abuse, sexual abuse, but it's also, what if you have a parent that was struggling themselves, or they had issues with mental illness? So they weren't overtly trying to harm you, but you got this message, I'm not safe with the people who I'm supposed to be most safe around. And that kind of changes your frame. It's a lot harder for you to get into a healthy relationship dynamic, especially when you start reading social media posts telling you, it's your fault, or worse, blaming everybody for everything that goes wrong in every relationship, which evokes a level of fear in you and reinforces your belief that all people are like this and this will eventually happen to you. And you hear this as, well, women are. That's a generalized statement, or men. So it's this gross generalization of everyone who's a certain sex based on how you're interpreting that. But a lot of times you're probably behaving in ways that are creating it.
I am fascinated and have been for a while now around the idea of attachment styles, attachment theory, love, our perception of it, our experience of it. One of the things you said before about the, I think, dismissive avoidant, and you talked about them being not trusting other people are unworthy or whatever, however you framed that. And my thought to that was, thinking about my own journey with trust and people and perception. And I went, I arrived at a realization recently that my issues with trust were never about the other person. Deeply, when I learned to open the door wide enough, that it was my inability to trust my choices, to set my boundaries, to create a safe space for me. And that gets projected onto the other people. There will always be untrustworthy or bad people or bad situations around us. But I think when we have the ability to make good decisions and set boundaries and have our own agency, and that was something I didn't have. Also, I remember for someone that went to therapy since I was 29 and kind of went, all this stuff happened as a kid, I should probably unpack that. I think there's some stuff in my personality and there's some challenges and coping mechanisms that are not what I've thought they are for my whole life so far. And it took years before the term attachment theory was said to me, and it wasn't even any of the therapists, and I thought it was ridiculous. I'm going to these therapists, I'm saying, I feel like I've got some work to do around relationships, and that, like, everything from friendships, family relationships, just intimacy, any sort of emotional intimacy. And it was until a friend of mine who is a coach, and he did some mindset coaching with me, and he introduced me to attachment theory. And I was like, how could I have never come across this term before? And it just gave me a bit of a deeper understanding. But this was a very long-winded journey to get to the next point I wanted to make, and that was around learning. My theory at the start was, okay, so I've at the ages of I think around maybe 5 or something, I don't know exactly, but 4 years, and from around about then, I was sexually abused. And so when I started down the path of going, I should go and unpack this, my question was, my idea was, that's what's created this attachment theory. Obviously, this is what's created me to have walls up and distrust and shame and all of the things that make connecting with other people in relationships difficult, and trust. But then you learn about attachment theory and when it develops and how it develops in those first couple of years of life. And I go, oh, hang on. And one of the things that Dr. Bill said that I work with now is that not enough of the right stuff is more detrimental than too much of the wrong stuff. And it took me a long time to look at my upbringing and realize that through no fault of my beautiful parents, the life situation that they were in, the circumstances, the business, and the time of it, because I've got a brother 7 years older, and he's got no problems with relationships. He's so different to me in relationships and connection. And I went, that's weird. Same parents, same 2 parents, totally different outcomes. But our life experience was very different. At about 2 or 3, we moved into a 7-day-a-week shop. And there was a level of unavailability that would have come with that, and a level of busyness that I have embedded within me, and, I grapple with these days. I'm going to stop talking now and you can unpack some stuff.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack. I think people are beautifully messy, but very messy indeed. I think a lot of times when we're struggling with something, we project expectations and demands on other people because we're angry about what we're struggling with or what we think we lack, or maybe we see characteristics in other people that deep down inside, ooh, I've seen that somewhere before. It's with me. Rather than saying, okay, we are complex people living in a complex world, raised by complex people who very often were doing the best they can with the resources they have. And I think that type of grace and empathy, and let me understand where you're coming from, and then hear me out and try to understand where I'm coming from, that becomes critical. Because regardless of what your attachment style is, and I've struggled with maladaptive attachment styles before. I had a front row seat to massive abuse. The way, never treat a woman or a human being the way I saw my adopted mother be treated. Demeaned, yelled at, cursed at, physically assaulted, pushed, like things that, as a very, very small child, controlled. Like every thought had to be approved. She needed permission to do absolutely anything. Like any thought she had, she couldn't voice it without some form of explicit or implicit permission. And I watched that. And when I got older, rather than mimicking that, I always thought, well, I'm just going to do the opposite. And I noticed you said, well, if you make good decisions, because people are always talking about, well, you just got to make better decisions. I think better decisions are built upon bad decisions, just like great ideas are built upon teams that are willing to generate completely crap ideas. Because how else do you learn? How else do you go out into the world and make a decision, not with malintent, but just with ignorance and go, oh, wow, that didn't work out. And sometimes you don't understand that. You can't discern that for years. So for me, when I started dating, I was the most over the top, romantic. I'm going to be the most loving person. I'm going to be the opposite of my stepfather. But I was kind of getting into the preoccupied attachment style where I was suffocating. And I didn't realize this. To me, I thought I was being a very good partner. And I was making decisions based on what I saw and not wanting to do the same things or even come within the same stratosphere of that. But I didn't know that they were bad decisions. And I didn't know this until many years later. Because sometimes somebody would just go, I don't want to see you again. Or they would go and cheat on me and find somebody else outside the relationship. So I thought, oh, well, that's unfortunate, or it's that person, not realizing what role I was playing in it and the bad decisions I was making that I didn't know were bad decisions. Because if I thought they were a bad decision, I probably wouldn't have made that decision. I don't think anybody goes out there and goes, okay, what's the worst decision I can make today? Okay, I'm going to go out and make that decision. I mean, that would be really interesting in life, just to see how your life plays out. Wake up every morning. What are the 3 worst decisions I can make? Let's just see what happens. But most people try to make good decisions, or they're not even aware of what's driving their decisions to begin with.
Yeah, you got
to be open and learn. And I think the big question here is, regardless of what produced, because then I had fear avoidant, and that's even worse for relationships. So I would end relationships. And I think the question is, regardless of what happened to you and how that produced the attachment style that you and your partners have been interacting with and having to deal with, what do you do about it? Like, how do you move forward from that in a constructive way?
Yeah.
And there's things that, and some of these things are things that I realized on a conscious level. Like, intellectually, I understood it, but emotionally, I rejected it.
Yeah.
First thing is what you're doing right now, Tiff, is that self-awareness and introspection of, okay, what caused me to respond in relationships the way that I respond? What am I afraid of? What is the emotion that's driving this response? Like in a lot of cases, I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid I'm going to be hurt. So I'm going to extricate myself from this relationship before this person has a chance to betray me as one more person that's hurt me. Just realizing that, just a recognition of your emotional states, recognition, is that even a word? You couldn't use that in the Bible, could you? But recognizing a cause and effect relationship between past events, their impact, and your current worldview and behaviors, that's an enormous first step, because awareness is literally the key to, or the lock on, constructive transformation in your life in any area. And then it's helping other people to understand. It's vulnerability. Being able to talk about, look, these are my fears. This is what happened to me growing up. These are my boundaries. And I need you to understand that I'm not being unpredictable. I'm not trying to be hurtful. What I'm basically trying to do is protect myself and be clear about boundaries, be clear about, what's going on with you, and talk to your partner about it so at least they understand. I think that's a powerful step. And the third one is something that's really dawning on me. Be kind to yourself. And we've talked about this, because this is one of those things where it's like, intellectually, okay, yeah, be kind to yourself. And I guess today with the class, I don't think this went over well. I don't think they really got it. But I grew up in Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn, it's a certain culture, especially the part of Brooklyn that I was growing up in. And you'll understand this because, Aussies are a little bit like this as well. If you really love one of your friends and there's a lot of affection, what do? What is that interaction like, Tiff? You're out with your mates.
I punch them in the face, but I don't know what most people do.
And it's something along the lines of that. Maybe not assaulting them, although like fights would break out all the time, but it was kind of like bonding. It wasn't malevolent. It wasn't hateful.
Yeah.
But we would just hang shit on each other constantly. It was like, because you banter, you make fun of one another, and it kind of creates a social dynamic. It kind of normalizes everybody within the group. And I was trying to explain that, like when I was a kid and one of us would fall off their bikes and get hurt, the job of everybody else was to laugh at the person who just injured themselves. And I think the room was like, okay. So, all right. Yeah. Wrong audience. But I grew up with that. So the whole thing around self-kindness and being compassionate to yourself, while I understood the value of it intellectually, emotionally, I was like, oh, that's a bit self-indulgent. But no, it's conscientious and it's generous and it's selfless, because if you're not kind to yourself, think about this. You're approaching a attachment style with the belief, I am unlovable, I'm unworthy. Now, if you think everybody else is unworthy, great. But if you think my partner is great, what effect are you having on your partner when you are unmerciful to yourself? Do you think that's fun for them? Is that exciting for them? Is that reassuring for them that you're going to be there when the yogurt hits the fan in life? No, it's not. You become difficult to be around. Are you laughing at the yogurt?
Yeah. Why yogurt?
I don't know. I just hate the term when the shit hits the fan. It's a disgusting visual. So just soften that a little bit.
Yeah. Now there's both yogurt and shit on my fan.
But that is even more disgusting. But the takeaway message is be compassionate to yourself. Like self-kindness is important regardless of what attachment style you're in. Because if you're not kind to yourself, you're not going to forgive yourself. And if you're not going to forgive yourself the things that you've done, you're very likely to repeat them because that's your identity. You know, like you tell your Dennis Waitley, I'll just say that, like, in The Psychology of Winning, he says, like, parents who tell their kids constantly, clean up your room. That's great. Clean up your room, you filthy little pigs. Well, if they're filthy pigs and they accept that, why would they ever clean up their room? Wouldn't they live like pigs once you convince them that they are such? So it's kind of like that line of thought. And of course, sometimes, like what you're doing with Dr. Bill, getting help from a therapist. A therapist can help you unpack this stuff. It could make an enormous difference. Now, I'm skeptical because I went for therapy, with Amy, and our therapist was amazing. Traditionally, I've in the past had not so great experiences with therapists, though. But a good therapist, the right therapist for you, can be extraordinary. She helped us unpack so much stuff.
Absolutely. And therapy is about finding the right style of therapy and the right therapist and the right relationship at the right time. So all of these different dynamics have to come together at the right time to meet you where you are and take you to where you're ready to go. And if any of those don't align, the right therapist coming at the wrong time or the right therapist with the wrong therapy, because I think for myself, it was a mix of understanding that there's intellectual and psychological therapy, there's talk therapy, there's stuff we need to unpack, there's stuff that needs to be said, and there's stuff that needs to be unpacked, and then there's stuff that in the here and now, but then there's also somatic stuff. There's the inability to feel, and that was the ball got rolling for me in the boxing ring. That's where it all started before I had a clue. It was just, it brought out the ability to access physical responses and emotions. And that kind of, all my walls came crumbling down from that experience. And then it was like, oh, well, some stuff here. I should work through that. But yeah, I think that's a long game, and it's figuring it out along the way, and knowing that I spent so long thinking a therapist has the answer. Oh, there's an answer. There's no answers in the world. No one's got a fucking clue. And Bill sits with me and I tell him about a scenario and he goes, this is what we'll do. We talk about stuff and this is what we'll do. And then I'll do something and then I'll go back to him and say, this is what I experienced. And, there was once when he was like, that's interesting. You have to leave me with that. This isn't something we can just muscle through. There's stuff going on for you. Let me sit and, think about the next steps of what's the best way for us to deal with that. Because, I loved the honesty of that. I loved the amount of trust he then had with me when he was like, oh, you've brought something new to the table that I don't have an answer for just yet. Let's work through this together. Because that's all anyone's doing. And the minute someone says they've got an answer, I have distrust for them because you don't have an answer.
Yeah, that's either a delusional person or someone who is trying to sell you something you probably shouldn't buy.
Yeah.
Because there's not the answer. I completely reject that. There's one right answer for everyone on any subject.
Yeah.
But what a really good therapist can do, if you're dealing with something that's pathological, a therapist would be appropriate, or even a life transition, you're going through, a coach or even a good friend, but someone who could sit with you and reflect and listen and allow you to talk through your own situation and unpeel layers of realization. There might not be the answer, but there is an answer. And that answer in the time being comes from you. There might be a better answer in the future, but the workable answer today is it's an inside job. Nobody can give that. That's a lot to expect out of anybody.
Yeah. But when they draw those answers out of you, you get to see things you wouldn't have seen before. You get to see progress that you make that you think you're not making. It's like going to the gym. You go to the gym every day and you look in the mirror every day and everything's the same, but then you take progress shots and you take your first one and your last one and you look at the difference and you go, oh, there is progress. And that happens, often when you have, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a bloody peer that you can reflect with, and you go, oh, here's an instance in my life where I do this, and you've got experience to draw on. And then you go, oh, actually, there's proof that I used to do that. And now how I do this is very different. Stops us getting anchored into I am this. Like when I learned of attachment styles and went, oh, I think I'm really avoidant. I was like, oh, well, that's it. What do I do with that? Just be it. But when you get to unpack it and go, I've cultivated more avoidant tendencies, especially given circumstances that have happened. But I don't sort of go, I am avoidant. I go, I have the tendency to be like this at times, and I need to watch how I manage that and learn to navigate it differently.
I love that. That's really important because people use identity statements around behaviors.
Yeah.
Rather than I smoke. I am a smoker. Well, it's part of your DNA. It's part of your identity.
Yeah.
Or like I am overweight. Well, if that's who you are and you change, then what are you or who are you?
Yeah.
I think that's important languaging. So there's this, how do I phrase it? I think sometimes, you can listen to a podcast like this, but your own thoughts and emotions and reactivity kind of gets in the way. And that's one of the reasons why advice doesn't work. It's easy to listen to a show like this because we're not necessarily giving advice. We're just discussing things that have worked for us, things that we've learned, things that, maybe we do professionally every day, and hoping somebody goes, oh, well, that works for me. I want to take that. Oh, you know what? That bit over there. No, I'm not ready for that. Or I don't agree with that. I don't want any of that. And we're hoping you don't take that. But it's a lot more confronting if we were sitting with somebody. So if we weren't a podcast and we were sitting at a restaurant with someone going through something and we were saying the same things, it was coming across as advice or as instruction, it's not as easy to go, okay, I'm choosing to take this because nobody's giving me advice. It's kind of like invalidating, and it contradicts. Even when people ask you for advice half the time, they're not really asking you, solve my problem. They're using you as a sounding board to kind of talk out what they're going through. So let me get your advice. Here's the situation. What they're really after is hear me out. So not only are they not obligated to take your advice, anytime that you try to guide or instruct in a way that's unsolicited, you're probably going to get a lot more resistance than progress with that person.
Yeah.
Because they have all those emotions and they're reacting to their perception of threat. They're not even thinking clearly if what they're struggling with is urgent and emergent enough, if it's real and present enough. They're reacting more than they're thinking and decidedly responding to situations. So it's not just like with therapy, it's with everybody. I think one of the best things we can do, because what came up today, the reason why I'm bringing this up is like, well, what do you do? And we talked about this when it's not you that has an issue. It's not you that's struggling with negativity. It's not you that is constantly anxious and afraid. It's someone that you love. And the first instinct is to jump in there and help somebody because emotionally they appear to be drowning. And if someone you love is drowning, jumping in and pulling them to safety is a normal reflex. But when it comes to that conversational dynamic, sometimes it produces the exact result you don't want. And it produces the exact biochemistry that makes it hard for that person to even hear you in the first place.
Yeah, I find when I find myself pausing before reaching out for coaching or advice or unpacking things and really sitting with things so much longer before, to reflect on it. What actually is it that I want? Like I try and find the answer or see where the potential roadblocks are, because I can be quite reactive in terms of having a thought, making a decision. And at the moment, I'm thinking more about just general life stuff, not therapy as such, but, sometimes going, oh, I'm frustrated or I'm stuck. I want to move forward in this direction or that direction and I'm not doing it. I need, so sometimes I'll reach out to someone and go, all right, I need to make something happen or make decisions. But I see myself more often stopping and just thinking and going, because I don't want to waste other people and my time. It's like, what are you willing? First, figure out what you're willing to do and what you're not and what you really deeply want. Otherwise, you're just unloading with a fucking whinge that you're not going to take action on. So get some real clarity about what you are and aren't willing to make changes to before you reach out. That's for me. That's for me in the current state and level of self-awareness and the stuff that I've already done when I get to a point of frustration where I want to move forward in an area and I'm not.
Well, even introspectively, not even before you reach out, introspectively, those are great questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
What exactly do I want in this situation? I'm clear about what I don't want. I'm clear about what keeps happening. What do I want and what am I prepared to do in order to bring it about? And what am I not prepared to do? So when you're faced with that situation, you don't get it, I guess, you start rationalizing, making excuses because you don't want to face that, you don't want to do something. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to do something. It's just be clear about exactly what you are willing to do. It's okay to not want something badly enough to take a certain course of action.
Yeah.
And there's steps kind of like before that to kind of dampen your psychological response to these reoccurring patterns of decisions that don't serve you. Like Jeffrey Schwartz, and he created this for people who are struggling with OCD, or they at least have an obsessive compulsive personality type, not necessarily as to the extent of a disorder. But I guess you could still use it for people who are making the same maladaptive decisions, and they're caught in a behavioral or a thought pattern that's causing them pain and frustration in their life. And it's the 4 R's. And it's relabel, reattribute, refocus, and revalue. So if every time you have a meeting and you have to get up and you have to present, like, so we have our monthly all staff meetings. A lot of companies do this, and department heads, you got to get up and report on, what's happening. And if you do really well and you're inspiring, you're well spoken, there's people in that room from across the region in the company, they're going to look at that. And at some point, they might say, wow, I remember Tiffanee at that all staff spoke for like 10 minutes, but man, she was amazing. We're having an event. Is Tiffanee available? And that opens up career opportunities. But if every time you get in front of the room, it's like, oh my God, I suck. I'm so bad at this. I shut down. I go blank. I'm horrible in front of a room. Well, the first thing is like relabel. You are having a challenge with a task. Public speaking. You're not confident. Not you suck. Not you're horrible. Oh God, I blow every presentation. I know I'm just going to blow it. I'm just going to go blank. You're fortune telling because it hasn't happened yet. Probably has happened because of the cycle of the thought patterns that you have and what that does to you emotionally. And then you get up there and it's just like you either completely choke or you just ramble on. So, what exactly is the problem? Relabel it. Get off of you to the actual problem. Second, reattribute it. What's going on? So with people with OCD, it's that phrase, it's not me, it's my OCD. So you say, well, this isn't me. These are the patterns in my head based on the fear I have and the biochemistry that's resulting from this fear that's created these experiences in the past. And I'm afraid I'm going to repeat them in the future. So what's like reattribute it to what's going on around you and within you rather than being an immutable characteristic. Refocus. What could you focus on? I'm going to focus on like looking right at somebody in the audience. I'm going to make eye contact with them and I'm going to break and go to somebody else. So I'm focused on the actual people in the room that I'm doing this for in the first place, rather than my own personal feelings, how I'm feeling about it. Is that going to eliminate the level of fear? No, but it can, without question, diminish it. If you've done any type of public speaking, try that if you haven't already. And the 4th R is what you're talking about. Revalue it. Like, what if I gave into the thoughts in my head? What if I just went up there and just like completely fell apart? Like, what would be the worst thing that can happen anyway? Right. And more importantly, what do I want to have happen? I don't want to go up there in front of like all of these regional vice presidents and just completely, what is the outcome? So now you can start to focus on what's needed to create that. So you have those steps that give you a little bit more clarity. So by the time you finally say, well, what do I want? Okay, well, what am I willing to do about it? Am I willing to go take courses? Am I willing to do deep breathing exercises? Am I willing to, if not take courses, buy a book? Am I willing to model other people that I look at within the organization? I'm like, wow, Jane's amazing in front of a room. That's why they had our all staff meeting this week. She thought she did horribly. She was up there for like 5 minutes. She was charming. She was concise. She was articulate. She was funny. She did a brilliant job. So I guess how we wrap on this is don't believe everything you think. Sometimes the problem is not an immutable characteristic that you possess, but it's something that happened in the past or an interpretation that's just creating a physiological, psychological response. You are not your thoughts.
I love it.
And you're not the worst experience you've ever had.
Or the best.
That probably even more important. So, well, thank you for joining us. And I guess this is where we wrap up, isn't it, Tiffany?
Yeah, look at you doing a good job of it too.
I am keeping time. So my partner today, when we were doing the panel discussion, because she knows me, she brought me this clock and she put it right in front of me.
I need to give you a clock.
She's like, I want you to look at this every so often and see where you're at. All right, thanks, Captain. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I get it. Good job. Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks, Tiff. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.